Did you know that an empire can die of 1,000 small cuts, just like a person? It rarely happens in a single, spectacular moment. It's a slow bleed, a gradual fading of the light, a series of forgotten promises and unattended cracks in the foundation. Imagine a grand marble statue, standing for centuries, so vast and solid that you believe it to be eternal. But inside, unseen, a network of tiny fissures spreads year after year, until one day, a simple push of the wind is all it takes to turn it to dust. The story of Rome's fall is not the story of that final push. It's the story of the cracks. Before you get too comfortable, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel to encourage me to make more content like this. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin tonight's journey. You are standing on a paved stone street, the sun of the 2nd century warming the marble of the buildings around you. This is the heart of the world, Rome, during the peak of its golden age, the era known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. The air is thick with 1,000 smells, the sweet scent of baking bread from a nearby pistrinum, the sharp tang of wine from a vendor's cart, the earthy smell of the Tiber River, and the perfume of wealthy women carried past you in covered litters. You hear a symphony of sounds, the murmur of 100 different languages and dialects, the clatter of chariot wheels on stone, the distant roar of a crowd in the Colosseum, and the constant, reassuring hum of a city of 1,000,000 souls, all living under the eagle standard of Rome. This is the world your great-great-grandparents could only have dreamed of. For nearly 200 years, this peace has held. An area stretching from the misty hills of Britain to the sun-scorched sands of Mesopotamia is bound together by a single law, a single currency, and a single, formidable military. You could travel from one end of the empire to the other on magnificent straight roads that cut through mountains and across valleys, safe from bandits and pirates. Fresh water flows into the city through monumental aqueducts, engineering marvels that supply the grand public baths, where citizens of all classes can relax. This is a system, a machine of unprecedented scale and efficiency. It feels eternal. It feels unbreakable. As you pass a grand amphitheater, you notice the archways at its base, wide passages designed to allow thousands of spectators to pour out quickly after a show. Some people mistakenly call these a vomitorium, imagining lavish aristocrats purging their feasts. But the name simply means to spew forth, a clever bit of Roman engineering for crowd control, a detail that speaks to their practical genius. Yet, as you look closer, you start to see the gilded edges of this cage. The peace is maintained by the constant, looming threat of the legions, stationed on every frontier. The incredible wealth that built these forums and temples is drawn from the provinces, often through heavy taxation, and it is built on the backs of millions of slaves who have no share in this prosperity. Historians still debate whether the Pax Romana was a true golden age for the common farmer in Gaul or the merchant in Egypt, or if it was merely a comfortable arrangement for the elite 1% living in Italy. For now, though the system works, the grain ships from Africa and Egypt arrive on time, the army is loyal, and the man who sits on the Palatine Hill, the emperor, is seen as a living god. You look up at a statue of the current emperor, a stoic, bearded man. It is Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king. He looks weary, as if he can already sense the chill of the winds that will soon blow from the north, as if he knows that he is the last of a good line, and that the long, peaceful summer is coming to an end. The stoic face of Marcus Aurelius, carved in stone, seems to watch over the city with a heavy heart. You feel a sense of security under his reign, a belief that reason and duty are the empire's bedrock. But that bedrock is about to be shaken. You turn your gaze eastward, beyond the horizon. There Roman legions are marching home in triumph from a campaign against the Parthian Empire. Their eagle standards gleam in the sun, and they bring with them spoils of war. tales of victory, and something else, an invisible passenger that clings to their clothes and their breath. It is the beginning of the first great shock to the system, a crack that will soon splinter across the entire Roman world. The year is 165 AD, and the Antonine Plague has arrived. At first, it is just whispers, a fever in the port city of Ostia, a strange sickness in the soldiers' barracks. Then, it explodes into the streets of Rome. You see it everywhere. People stumble with burning fevers, their bodies racked with coughs that bring up not just phlegm, but blood. A terrible rash appears, dark and pustular, marking its victims. The city's vibrant hum of life transforms into a symphony of sorrow. The sounds of weeping families and the constant, grim rattle of carts carrying the dead to mass graves outside the city walls. The grand public baths, once centers of social life, become places of fear. The gods seem silent. Prayers go unanswered. The great physician Galen, who was in Rome at the time, meticulously documented the gruesome symptoms but could offer no cure. Even he, the most respected medical mind of the age, eventually fled the city, a testament to the sheer terror and helplessness that gripped everyone. The plague rages for 15 years, and its toll is catastrophic. It is believed to have been an outbreak of either smallpox or measles, diseases to which the Roman population had no immunity. At its peak, it kills thousands a day in Rome alone. Across the empire, the death toll is estimated to be in the millions, perhaps wiping out as much as a quarter of the population in some areas. The legions are hollowed out, making it harder to defend the long frontiers. Farms lie fallow as the farmers who worked them are gone, leading to food shortages and economic disruption. The invincible, eternal empire suddenly feels fragile, vulnerable to an enemy it cannot see, fight, or comprehend. This is the first great turning point, the moment the boundless optimism of the Pax Romana dies, and then the second blow falls. In the year 180 AD, while on campaign against Germanic tribes along the Danube River, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, dies. It is widely believed he, too, was a victim of the plague. His death marks the end of the era of the 5 good emperors, a period of unparalleled stability where each emperor had adopted a worthy successor. Marcus breaks this tradition. His successor is not a carefully chosen, competent administrator. It is his own biological son, Commodus. Where Marcus was thoughtful, dutiful, and stoic, Commodus is vain, brutish, and obsessed with his own physical prowess. You see the change immediately. The gravitas in the corridors of power is replaced by the swagger of a preening narcissist. Commodus pictures himself as the reincarnation of Hercules and scandalizes the elite by fighting as a gladiator in the Colosseum, a spectacle considered deeply degrading for an emperor. While his father wrestled with philosophy, Commodus wrestles with paid opponents in the arena. The reins of the empire are now in the hands of a man who cares more for applause than for policy. Historians still debate the true demographic devastation of the Antonine Plague, but its psychological impact, coupled with the disastrous succession of Commodus, is undeniable. It was the perfect storm, a biological catastrophe followed by a leadership vacuum. The gilded cage has been breached, and a sickness of the body has been followed by a sickness in the head of the state. The spectacle of Commodus playing God in the arena ends as ignominiously as you might expect. He is not struck down by a worthy challenger or a political rival in the Senate. He is strangled in his bath by a wrestler, a hired hand in a palace conspiracy. His death in 192 AD doesn't bring relief. It opens a Pandora's box of chaos. The precarious balance of power shatters completely, and the century that follows is a dizzying, brutal carnival of violence and instability. You are now living in the crisis of the 3rd century, and the very concept of Rome is being torn apart at the seams. The immediate aftermath of Commodus's death is a grim farce. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers meant to protect the emperor, realize that they are the new kingmakers. They murder Commodus's respectable successor, Pertinax, after he tries to instill discipline. And then they do something unprecedented, something that lays bare the decay at the heart of the empire. They auction off the throne of the Caesars to the highest bidder. 2 wealthy senators, Didius, Julianus and Supetinus, stand outside the Praetorian camp, literally shouting bids for control of the world. Didius Julianus wins, promising an astronomical sum to each soldier. His reign lasts just 66 days before he is executed, as frontier legions, disgusted by the affair in Rome, march on the city with their own imperial candidates. This sets the terrifying pattern for the next 50 years. The emperor is no longer a magistrate chosen by the Senate or a son inheriting his father's legacy. He is a barracks emperor, a successful general hoisted onto the shields of his soldiers, who proclaim him Augustus. You learn not to get attached to the face on the coins, because it will change in a year, or a month, or even a week. Being emperor becomes the most dangerous job in the world. Of the more than 25 men who claimed the title during this 50-year period, nearly all die violently, murdered by their own troops, assassinated by a rival, or killed in yet another pointless civil war. The Roman army, once the protector of the frontiers, has turned inward, becoming a self-devouring serpent. The empire is a chessboard, and the pieces are legions, constantly marching not against the Goths or the Persians, but against each other. This constant warfare has a devastating effect on your daily life. To keep their restless armies loyal, each new emperor needs to pay them, and pay them well. But the state coffers are empty, so they resort to a desperate measure. They debase the currency. The silver coin in your hand, the denarius, once the backbone of the economy, is slowly poisoned from within. You watch as the coins of your grandfather, heavy with nearly pure silver, are replaced by new ones that are mostly bronze, just thinly washed with a silver coating to keep up appearances. It's a trick, and everyone knows it. Prices for everyday goods, for a loaf of bread or a jug of wine, spiral out of control. Your life savings become worthless. Trade grinds to a halt because no one trusts the money anymore. People revert to barter, trading goods for goods, a sign that the sophisticated economic machine of the empire is breaking down. Historians still debate the primary driver of the crisis, whether it was military anarchy, economic collapse, or social breakdown. But the truth, you see, is that they are all feeding each other in a vicious cycle. The empire isn't just politically unstable, it's becoming physically fragmented. In the chaos, large territories break away, forming their own mini-empires, like the Gallic Empire in the west, and the Palmyrene Empire in the east, under the formidable Queen Zenobia. The unbreakable, monolithic Rome of the Pax Romana is gone. In its place are 3 warring states, each claiming to be the true heir, while the cracks in the great marble statue spiderweb into gaping fissures. Out of the endless, bloody twilight of the 3rd century, a new figure emerges. You see him not in a toga in the Senate, but in a soldier's cloak, his face weathered by the sun of the Danubian frontier. He is not another pampered aristocrat or a general hungry only for a quick payday. This is Aurelian. He is a man of iron will, born of humble origins in the Balkans, a career soldier who rose through the ranks on pure, ruthless competence. He is a lightning storm in human form, and for a brief, brilliant 5 years, he will hold the crumbling empire together through sheer force of will. He arrives on the scene in 270 AD, and you feel a surge of something that has been absent for decades, a flicker of genuine hope. His energy is relentless. He is a whirlwind of action. First, he hurls back the Germanic tribes that have poured across the Danube. Then he turns his gaze to the fractured pieces of the empire. To the east, the dazzling Queen Zenobia of Palmyra has carved out a massive kingdom for herself, controlling the vital provinces of Egypt and the Levant. Her court is a center of learning and culture, a beacon in the chaos. But in the eyes of Rome, she is a rebel. Aurelian marches his legions across Anatolia and into the Syrian desert. His campaign is swift, brutal, and decisive. He crushes Zenobia's armies, captures the wealthy city of Palmyra, and takes the queen herself captive. You witness his grand triumph in Rome, a spectacle meant to awe the world back into submission. It is a parade of wonders, with exotic animals, captured treasures, and at its center, the proud Zenobia, forced to walk in magnificent but heavy golden chains. It is a clear message: Rome is back. Next, he turns west. The so-called Gallic Empire, encompassing Gaul, Britain, and Hispania, has been separate for over a decade. But its foundations are weak, exhausted by the same internal strife as Rome itself. The Gallic Emperor Tetricus sees the writing on the wall. In a decisive battle, he and his son effectively surrender to Aurelian, rejoining their territory with the empire. In just a few short years, Aurelian has stitched the sundered halves of the Roman world back together. The Senate, overjoyed, bestows upon him a title of immense significance: Restitutor Orbis, the restorer of the world. The coins now bear his image with this proud inscription. For a moment, it seems the crisis is over. The great marble statue has been pieced back together. But was it a true restoration, or just a temporary fix? You walk the streets of Rome and see evidence that gnaws at this newfound confidence. A massive construction project is underway. Thousands of workers, under Aurelian's orders, are building a new set of defensive walls around the city of Rome itself. For 7 centuries, Rome had needed no walls, for its legions were its walls, pushing the frontiers hundreds of miles away. The Aurelian walls, a monumental feat of engineering, are also a monumental admission of fear. They are a tacit acknowledgement that the world is no longer safe, that the heart of the empire is now vulnerable to attack. It is the action of a man who has restored the world, but does not trust that it will stay restored. Historians still debate whether Aurelian's reforms, had he been allowed to continue them, could have set the empire on a path to true recovery. He attempted to reform the worthless currency and bring order to the administration, but he was still a product of the very system he was trying to fix. In 275 AD, after just 5 years as emperor, the restorer of the world is assassinated by his own officials, victims of a clerical error and a forged list of targets. The lightning storm passes, and you are left standing beside a newly walled city, wondering if those walls are meant to keep the world out, or to simply hold a fragile empire in. The brief, bright hope ignited by Aurelian is extinguished with his death, and for a few more years, the familiar, grim carousel of barracks emperors resumes its turn. The restorer of the world is gone, and the walls he built around Rome stand as a monument to a peace that feels increasingly fragile. Then, in 284 AD, another soldier from the Balkans, a man named Diocles, who renames himself Diocletian, is acclaimed emperor by his troops. You see in him the same steely resolve as Aurelian, the same humble origins and military prowess, but Diocletian possesses something more: a genius for administration and a radical, chillingly logical understanding of the empire's sickness. He looks at the vast, ungovernable territory, the constant usurpations, the simultaneous crises on multiple fronts, and he comes to a conclusion that shatters 300 years of tradition. The Roman Empire is simply too big for one man to rule. The job of emperor has become impossible. If you march to the Rhine to fight the Franks, a general in Syria declares himself Augustus. If you sail to Britain to put down a rebellion, the Goths pour across the Danube. You are playing a game of whack-a-mole on a map the size of the continental United States, and you are losing. Diocletian's solution is not just to find a helper, but to fundamentally redesign the entire concept of imperial power. He creates what will be known as the Tetrarchy, the rule of 4. The empire is formally divided into an eastern and a western half. Each half will be ruled by a senior emperor, an Augustus, and each Augustus will adopt a junior emperor, a Caesar, who will be his heir and assistant. 4 rulers, 4 mobile courts, 4 armies, all working in concert. It's a bit like a modern corporation deciding to create 2 separate headquarters, each with its own CEO and a designated successor. It is a breathtakingly logical and deeply un-Roman idea. This new system is meant to solve everything at once. With a ruler present in every major trouble spot, rebellions can be crushed before they begin. The succession crisis is solved, as the Caesars are the designated heirs, eliminating the bloody free-for-all that follows an emperor's death. To further cement his authority, Diocletian transforms the very nature of the emperorship. The old title of princeps, or first citizen, is discarded. He is now dominus, lord and master. He adopts the elaborate rituals of the Persian court, wearing jewel-encrusted silk robes and demanding that those who approach him perform proskynesis, prostrating themselves on the floor. You would no longer clap him on the back as an equal. You would approach him as a god. This is a deliberate political strategy to elevate the emperor so far above the common soldier that the idea of assassinating him becomes an act of sacrilege, not just treason. But this god-king finds he cannot simply command reality to bend to his will. Racked by the hyperinflation you experienced during the 3rd century crisis, Diocletian issues his famous edict on maximum prices in 301 AD. It is a list of over 1,000 price controls, for everything from a pint of beer to a day's wages for a lawyer, even specifying the cost of transporting goods. The penalty for violating the edict is death. The result is an absolute disaster. Merchants simply pulled their goods from the market, creating shortages and a thriving black market where prices are even higher. The edict is a spectacular failure, a powerful lesson in the limits of authoritarian control. Historians still debate whether the tetrarchy was a brilliant innovation that saved the state from collapse, or an act that institutionalized the very divisions that would later tear the empire in two for good. For now, however, it seems to work. The empire is stable, the frontiers are quiet, and the machine of government, now 4 times as large, grinds on. Diocletian, the master architect, has designed a perfect system for an imperfect world, a system that relies on one crucial element, the selfless cooperation of powerful men. That perfect system, the tetrarchy, proves to be as fragile as the human ego it was meant to contain. In 305 AD, Diocletian does something no emperor has done before. He voluntarily abdicates, retiring to a magnificent palace on the Dalmatian coast to grow cabbages. He expects his co-Augustus, Maximian, to do the same, and for the 2 new Caesars to rise, ensuring a smooth transition. He has designed a machine of state that should run without him, but the machine is run by men, and the sons of the former emperors, like Constantine and Maxentius, have been left out of the new arrangement. They do not intend to be forgotten. The moment Diocletian leaves the stage, his carefully constructed system shatters into a dozen pieces, plunging the empire back into a series of brutal, sprawling civil wars. You watch as the dream of 4-part harmony dissolves into a cacophony of ambition. Armies once again march against armies. From Britain, Constantine, the son of the Western Caesar Constantius, is proclaimed emperor by his father's loyal troops. In Rome, Maxentius, son of Maximian, seizes control. For the next several years, the empire is a bloody chessboard of shifting alliances and betrayals. Out of this chaos, Constantine emerges as the master strategist, the ultimate survivor. He consolidates his power in the west, and in 312 AD, he marches on Italy to confront Maxentius. The final, decisive battle takes place just outside the walls of Rome, at the Milvian Bridge. The night before the battle, something happens that will change the course of human history. As you look up at the sky with Constantine's army, you see a vision, or so the story goes. A luminous cross of light hangs in the heavens, and with it, the words in hoc signo vinces, "In this sign, you will conquer." Constantine, A man who had previously worshipped the sun god Sol, Invictus, orders his soldiers to paint the Christian symbol, the Chiro, on their shields. The psychological effect is electric. The next day, his smaller army fights with a fanatic zeal, driving the forces of Maxentus back towards the Tiber River. The bridge becomes a bottleneck, and Maxentus, thrown into the water by the crush of his own panicking men, is drowned by the weight of his armor. Constantine enters Rome as the undisputed master of the West. Now in control, he makes a decision of monumental importance, a great Eastern gambit that will seal the fate of the old capital. Rome, to him, is a city of the past. It is the heart of the old pagan aristocracy, a place of intrigue and tradition that resists his new vision. It is also strategically obsolete, too far from the wealthy eastern provinces and the critical Danubian and Persian frontiers. He needs a new Rome. He finds it at the site of an old Greek city called Byzantium. It is a location of unparalleled strategic genius. Situated on a peninsula, it is easily defended. It controls the Bosphorus Strait, the choke point for all trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. It is a bridge between Europe and Asia. Here, on this spot, he will build his new capital, Constantinople. The construction is a massive, world-altering project. Constantine strips the great cities of Greece and Asia Minor of their artistic treasures, their statues, columns, and monuments, to adorn his new city. To populate it, he offers incentives, most famously a free daily ration of bread for any who would settle there, a policy that drains the vital Egyptian grain supply that once fed Rome. The center of gravity of the entire Roman world visibly shifts eastward. The wealth, the administration, the imperial court, the best legions, all are now concentrated in the east. Historians still debate whether Constantine's creation of Constantinople was a masterstroke that allowed the Roman state to survive in the east for another 1,000 years, or if it was the act that fatally starved the western half of the resources and attention it needed to survive. As you stand on the newly built forums of Constantinople, breathing the sea air, old Rome feels like a distant, fading memory. It has become a grand museum, while the future is being built here, in the east. The Chiro, the symbol Constantine's soldiers painted on their shields at the Milvian Bridge, is no longer just a secret sign scratched on catacomb walls. You see it everywhere now, on the standards of legions, stamped onto new coins, and carved into the stone of rising public buildings. The victory was not just military, it was theological. Constantine, now the sole ruler of the entire empire after defeating his eastern rival, is convinced that he owes his success to the Christian God. This personal conviction will now become imperial policy, and you are about to witness a profound spiritual revolution that will send shockwaves through every level of Roman society. The cross is now planted firmly in the field of swords. In 313 AD, Constantine and his co-emperor Licinius issued the Edict of Milan. This is the widely known fact. The moment the tide officially turns, you must understand what this means for the people around you. For generations, Christians have been a persecuted minority, subject to waves of brutal suppression. Most recently under Diocletian, their faith was an illegal superstition. Now, overnight, it is not just legal, it is favored. The edict proclaims religious tolerance for all, but its true beneficiary is Christianity. Confiscated church property is returned. Bishops, once hunted men, are now welcomed at the imperial court, becoming trusted advisors. Constantine pours enormous sums of state money into the construction of magnificent churches, grand basilicas that rival the old pagan temples in their scale and beauty. You see them rise in Rome, in Jerusalem, and in his new capital, Constantinople, their interiors gleaming with gold mosaics, the air thick with the scent of incense. But this new faith is not the monolithic, unified force Constantine might have hoped for. He soon discovers that Christians are fiercely divided amongst themselves over complex points of doctrine. He hoped for a unifying ideology, but instead, he has inherited a family argument. The most significant of these is the Arian controversy, a bitter dispute over the very nature of Christ. Is he fully divine and co-eternal with God the Father, or was he a created being, subordinate to the Father? To you, this might seem like a subtle theological point, but in the 4th century, it is a matter of cosmic importance, a battle for the soul of the faith. The empire is torn apart by riots and debates over a single Greek letter that separates the two positions. To settle the matter, Constantine convenes the first great ecumenical council at Nicaea in 325 AD. You can picture it, hundreds of bearded bishops from across the empire, many still bearing the scars of past persecutions, gathered to argue scripture under the watchful eye of the emperor, who now finds himself acting as a theological referee. Amidst this, you see the rise of a new kind of imperial activity, the religious pilgrimage. Constantine's own mother, Helena, a devout Christian, travels to the Holy Land. There, according to legend, she undertakes a miraculous archaeological quest, uncovering the sites of Jesus' life and, most famously, discovering the true cross upon which he was crucified. This eccentric curiosity, the story of an empress digging for relics, has an immense impact. It sanctifies the very soil of the empire and starts a thriving trade in holy artifacts, both real and fake, that will last for centuries. Historians still debate whether Christianity acted as a powerful social cement for the disintegrating Roman world, providing a new, universal identity, or as a divisive force that created new lines of conflict, devalued traditional Roman civic virtues, and consumed the state's energy in internal squabbles. As you watch a pagan priest quietly making a sacrifice at an ancient temple, while the sound of Christian chants echoes from a new basilica across the street, you realize the empire now has two souls, warring for its future. The spiritual division you witness, with old gods and a new one, vying for the soul of the empire, is mirrored by a change in the physical body of the state, its army. The legions, for centuries the engine of conquest and the ultimate symbol of Roman identity, are becoming something new, something different, something that would be almost unrecognizable to a soldier from the age of Augustus. The frontiers are long, and the threats are many. The civil wars and plagues of the past century have done their work, and there are simply not enough Roman men to fill the ranks. The very citizens who benefit from the empire's protection are increasingly unwilling to endure the harsh life of a soldier, so the emperors turn to a pragmatic, but deeply dangerous, solution. They begin to hire the enemy to defend the borders. You find yourself near a military camp along the Danube frontier. The air is cold, and you can see your breath. You watch the soldiers as they drill. Some look familiar, with the classic short haircuts and disciplined movements of traditional Roman infantry, but many more do not. You see tall, fair-haired men with long beards, their legs clad in trousers, a garment long considered by Romans to be the mark of an uncivilized barbarian. They carry different shields, wield different weapons, and shout commands to one another in harsh, guttural languages that are not Latin. These are the Foederati Federate allies. They are Goths, Franks, Alemanni, entire tribes of people who have been allowed to settle on Roman land in exchange for military service. They do not fight in traditional Roman cohorts. They fight under their own chieftains, with their own customs and loyalties. This policy is born of desperation, a way to get boots on the ground quickly and cheaply, but it fundamentally changes the character of the army, a cohesive, professional force with a singular loyalty to the emperor, and the idea of Rome is slowly being replaced by a patchwork quilt of allied warbands. The loyalty of these groups is often personal, given to the specific general who pays them well, not to the abstract state, and their presence creates a deep-seated anxiety within Roman society. You see it in the cities, where these barbarian soldiers, with their different dress and customs, are a constant, visible reminder of the empire's changing demographic. In a strange and telling detail, the government in Rome periodically issues laws forbidding citizens from wearing barbarian-style clothing like trousers or fur coats within the city walls, a desperate attempt to legislate Romanus back into existence. This process is sometimes called the barbarization of the military, but that term is loaded. Historians still debate whether this was a fatal weakness or a necessary adaptation. One perspective holds that it was a cancer, hollowing out the Roman military from within, creating a fifth column that would eventually turn on its masters. This view sees the reliance on mercenaries as a sign of terminal decline, an empire too decadent or exhausted to defend itself. Another perspective argues that it was a flexible and pragmatic response to a severe manpower crisis, a system that successfully defended the empire for a long time, integrating new peoples into the Roman world and using their martial skills to Rome's advantage. According to this view, the problem was not the system itself, but how it was managed, particularly when the Roman state failed to keep its promises of pay or land. As you watch a Gothic chieftain confer with a Roman legate, you see the precariousness of the arrangement. They are allies for now, a partnership of convenience, but there is a tension in the air, a sense of two different worlds colliding, a fragile trust that could be shattered by a single broken promise. And you have a chilling thought: what happens when you invite a hungry wolf into your home and then forget to feed it? The fragile trust between the Roman state and its Gothic allies is about to shatter in the most spectacular and devastating way imaginable. The year is 378 AD. You are in the Roman province of Thrace, a sun-baked, dusty region in what is now modern-day Bulgaria. The air is tense, humming with the sound of thousands of marching feet and the jangle of weapons. For 2 years, a large group of Goths, led by a chieftain named Fritigorn, has been rampaging through the Balkans. They are not invaders in the traditional sense. They were refugees, Goths who had been given permission to cross the Danube River into the empire to escape the terrifying advance of a new people from the steppes, the Huns. But once inside, they were mercilessly exploited by corrupt Roman officials who stole their food, enslaved their children, and treated them with contempt. The hungry wolf had been welcomed in and then starved. Now, it has turned on its masters. The Eastern Roman Emperor, Valens, decides he must crush this rebellion himself. He is a man known for his piety, but also for a stubborn, arrogant pride. He gathers a massive imperial field army, one of the largest assembled in decades, and marches to confront the Goths near the city of Adrianople. His nephew, the Western Emperor Gratian, is on his way with reinforcements, but Valens is eager for a solo victory. He wants the glory for himself. Spies report that the Gothic force is smaller than it actually is, and believing he has a clear advantage, Valens decides to attack immediately, without waiting for Gratian. The day of the battle, August 9th, is brutally hot. You march with the Roman legions as they are hurried into formation after a long, grueling approach under the scorching sun, with no time for food or water. Before them, the Goths have formed a defensive circle with their wagons, a laager, protecting their women and children. The Roman lines advance, weary and thirsty, into a hail of arrows and javelins. The battle is a chaotic, brutal slog. The Roman left wing, consisting of cavalry, makes some initial progress, but they are overextended and unsupported. And then, the disaster happens. Just as the battle hangs in the balance, a huge force of Gothic heavy cavalry, which had been away foraging, thunders back onto the field and smashes into the exposed Roman flank. The effect is catastrophic. The Roman cavalry is routed, and the infantry, now trapped and surrounded, collapses into a panicked mob. You are in the midst of it, a terrifying crush of men and steel. The lines have broken. There is no room to fight, no room to run. Soldiers are packed so tightly they can't even raise their arms to swing their swords. The Goths press in from all sides, cutting them down relentlessly. It is a slaughter. The elite legions of the East are annihilated. 2/3 of the army is wiped out. Dozens of high-ranking officers are killed. And somewhere in that field of blood and dust, the Emperor Valens falls. His body is never found. An eccentric and debated account of his death, provided by the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, claims he was wounded by an arrow and carried to a nearby farmhouse. The Goths, unaware the emperor was inside, surrounded the house and, unable to break in, simply set it on fire, burning him alive. The news of Adrianople spreads like a shockwave across the empire. It is more than just a military defeat. It is a psychological cataclysm. An emperor has been killed in battle by barbarians on Roman soil, and a premier field army has been utterly destroyed. The myth of Roman invincibility, already battered, is now shattered beyond repair. For the first time, everyone understands that the barbarians are not just a nuisance to be managed at the frontiers. They are a mortal threat, capable of destroying the very best the empire can muster. Historians still debate the long-term strategic significance of the battle. Some see it as the decisive turning point, the beginning of the end for the Western Empire, proving that Gothic heavy cavalry could defeat Roman infantry. Others argue that its impact was more psychological than military, a blow from which Roman prestige and morale never truly recovered. As the sun sets on the bloody field of Adrianople, it feels like the sun is setting on the Roman world itself. The gate is not just open, it has been kicked off its hinges. The smouldering field of Adrianople has left a gaping wound in the Roman psyche and a power vacuum in the east. The victorious Goths are roaming the countryside at will, a constant, terrifying reminder of the empire's vulnerability. Into this chaos steps a man chosen not for his lineage, but for his proven competence. His name is Theodosius, a skilled general from Hispania, appointed by the Western Emperor Gratian to salvage the catastrophic situation in the east. You watch him take command, and you see not a man seeking glory in battle, but a pragmatist facing an impossible problem. The army is gone, he cannot fight the Goths and win. So, he does the next best thing. He makes a deal. In 382 AD, Theodosius signs a treaty with the Goths that is unlike any before it. He allows them to settle in a large swath of territory south of the Danube, but they are not disarmed or dispersed among the population as was traditional. Instead, they are allowed to remain as a unified, autonomous people, a nation within the nation, living under their own laws and their own chieftains. They are foederati, but on an unprecedented scale. In exchange, they are to provide soldiers for the Roman army, but they will fight as a distinct Gothic contingent under their own commanders. It is a deeply controversial solution. Some see it as a brilliant piece of diplomacy, turning a destructive enemy into a much-needed source of military manpower. Others see it as a fatal concession, a surrender of sovereignty that formalizes a barbarian state within the heart of the empire. Historians still debate whether this treaty was a stroke of genius that saved the East from collapse, or the moment the state truly began to outsource its own existence. While grappling with this military reality, Theodosius also presides over the final act of the empire's spiritual transformation. Christianity is no longer just the favored religion, it is now the only one. In 380 AD, with the Edict of Thessalonica, Theodosius makes Nicene Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. The age of tolerance is over. You see the tangible results of this decree everywhere. Pagan temples are closed, their vast revenues confiscated by the state. The oracle at Delphi falls silent. In 393 AD, the ancient Olympic Games, a tradition stretching back over 1,000 years, are held for the last time and then abolished as a pagan festival. Perhaps most poignantly, in Rome itself, the sacred eternal flame in the Temple of Vesta, which had been kept alight by the Vestal Virgins for more than 11 centuries as a symbol of the city's life and continuity, is permanently extinguished. It is a quiet, simple act that symbolizes a profound ending. For a brief period, after a series of civil wars against usurpers in the West, Theodosius reigns as the sole emperor of the entire Roman world, from Britain to Syria. He is the last man who will ever hold this title. When he dies in Milan in 395 AD, he makes a fateful decision on his deathbed. He divides the empire between his two sons. His elder son, the 17-year-old Arcadius, is to rule the east from Constantinople. His younger son, the 10-year-old Honorius, is to rule the west from Milan, and later Ravenna. This is the final, permanent split. It is not an administrative division of labor like Diocletian's tetrarchy, designed for efficiency while maintaining a unified whole. It is an inheritance, a divorce. From this moment on, there are two separate Roman empires. They have their own courts, their own armies, their own bureaucracies, and increasingly, their own separate and often competing interests. The two brothers, weak and inexperienced, become pawns in the hands of powerful advisors and barbarian generals. The two halves of the empire will rarely cooperate again. More often, they will watch each other's struggles with indifference, or even actively work against one another. The western half, poorer, less populated, and facing more immediate and numerous threats along its vast frontiers, is now truly on its own. The great Roman state, once a single body, has been surgically cut in two. You are now a citizen of the western half, and you can already feel it listing, like a ship that has lost its rudder in a gathering storm. You are now a citizen of a divided house, and the storm you felt gathering is about to break. The Western Empire, under the young and timid Honorius, is governed not from the grand heart of Rome, but from the marsh-protected, easily defended city of Ravenna. The government has retreated into a fortress, a telling sign of its insecurity. Meanwhile, the Goths, the very people Theodosius settled within the empire, are a restless and powerful force. Their leader is a man named Alaric. He is not a wild barbarian bent on mindless destruction. He is a product of the Roman system, a man who has served in the Roman army, who has fought for the empire, and who wants his due. He wants a formal command, land for his people, and the respect and pay that comes with it. But the paranoid, squabbling court in Ravenna denies him at every turn. They treat him as a tool to be used and discarded. Alaric, his patience exhausted, decides to show them just how powerful a tool he can be. He marches his Visigothic army into Italy. His target is not conquest, but leverage. He does not want to destroy Rome. He wants to hold it hostage. You watch from a distance as a grim, repeating drama unfolds. 3 times in 3 years, Alaric brings his army to the gates of Rome. The first 2 times, he is bought off with enormous sums of gold and promises that are later broken by the imperial court. The city is starved into submission, its people reduced to desperation, but it is not attacked. The Senate in Rome sends frantic messages to the emperor in Ravenna, begging him to negotiate, to save the ancient capital. But Honorius remains safe behind his swamps, seemingly detached from the crisis. A famous and perhaps apocryphal story circulates that perfectly captures the absurdity of the leadership. When a messenger arrives in Ravenna and breathlessly reports, "Rome has perished," the emperor is said to have burst into tears, thinking the man was referring to his favorite pet chicken, which he had named Roma. Upon being told it was the city that had fallen, he was visibly relieved. Whether true or not, the story spreads because it feels true. It depicts an emperor more concerned with his poultry than with the fate of the civilized world. This is the eccentric curiosity that becomes a legend, a joke told with a bitter taste. In August of 410 AD, Alaric's patience finally runs out. The siege is on again, but this time it ends differently. On the night of August 24th, the Salarian gate is opened from the inside, some say by disgruntled slaves hoping for freedom. The Goths pour into the city. For the first time in 800 years, since the days of the early Republic, when Gauls had burned it to the ground, The city of Rome is in the hands of a foreign enemy. You hear the sounds of shouting, of splintering wood, of valuables being gathered. For 3 days, the Goths sacked the city. Yet, this is not the apocalyptic firestorm you might imagine. Alaric, a Christian himself, gives orders that the great basilicas of St. Peter and St. Paul are to be considered sanctuaries, and that no one who takes refuge there is to be harmed. It is a methodical, organized looting, not a wholesale slaughter. The physical damage is significant, but not fatal. The city is plundered of its portable wealth. Centuries of accumulated treasures are carried away. But the true wound is not to the buildings, it is to the idea of Rome itself. The news travels across the Mediterranean on the shipping lanes, and the reaction is one of stunned disbelief. In his monastery in Bethlehem, the great Christian scholar Saint Jerome hears the news and is so devastated he cannot speak. When he finally writes, his words capture the horror of the entire Roman world. The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken. My voice is choked, and my sobs interrupt the words that I write. The lamp of the world has been extinguished. Historians still debate the scale of the actual physical destruction, but the psychological and symbolic damage was immeasurable. The spell of Roma Eterna, eternal Rome, was broken. The city was just a city. It could fall. And in a final, bizarre twist, when the Goths march south out of the city, they take with them not just gold and silver, but a living hostage of the highest possible value, the emperor's own half-sister, Galla Placidia. The echo of this falling city would resound for generations, a death knell for the idea of an invulnerable world order. The gold Alaric carried away from Rome was more than just treasure, it was lifeblood. The empire runs on gold, to pay the soldiers, to bribe other barbarian tribes, to keep the vast machinery of the state turning. Now, a huge portion of that wealth is gone, and the imperial treasury is gasping for air. But the expenses do not stop. The army, however fragmented and unreliable, still needs its pay. The sprawling bureaucracy still needs its salaries. And so, the state turns its gaze inward, looking for wealth not in foreign mines or conquered lands, but in the pockets of its own citizens. It looks at you. The sack of the capital city is a distant, horrifying story. The arrival of the imperial tax collector at your farm door is a tangible, immediate terror. You are living in a world of poisonous, empty pockets. The economic system that underpinned the Pax Romana has been rotting from the inside for centuries, and now the decay is reaching its final stages. You see it first in the money you use. You remember the stories from your grandfather about the heavy silver coins of the old days. The coins you use now are a joke. They are tiny bronze discs, crudely struck, with only the faintest wash of silver to give them the illusion of value. You know they are worthless. The baker knows they are worthless. So the price of a loaf of bread changes by the day, always going up. This hyperinflation makes planning for the future impossible. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite, the great landowners and government officials, have insulated themselves from this chaos. They conduct their business in the gold solidus, a coin introduced by Constantine that has maintained its purity and value. There is a two-tiered economy, gold for the rich, and junk metal for everyone else. The state, knowing its own currency is worthless, often refuses to even accept it for taxes. Instead, the tax collectors demand payment in kind, the unnud. They arrive at your small farm with their ledgers and their armed guards. They measure your fields, count your olive trees, assess your livestock. They calculate your tax burden not in money, but in bushels of wheat, jars of oil, and heads of cattle. There is no room for negotiation. There is no mercy for a bad harvest or a sick animal. If you cannot pay, they will take your tools, your land, and if all else fails, they will take your children into servitude. This system is famously, brutally efficient, but it is also crushing the life out of the empire's agricultural base. Small farmers like you are caught in an impossible trap. The taxes are so high that you can barely feed your own family. To escape this burden, many of your neighbors are making a desperate choice. They are abandoning their land altogether. Some flee to the cities, hoping to disappear into the anonymous crowds and live on the state-bred dole, a policy that is itself becoming unsustainable. Others do something that is a seed of the future medieval world. They willingly hand over their ancestral land to a local strongman, a wealthy senator with a vast, fortified estate, in exchange for signing away your freedom and becoming a tenant farmer, a colonus, bound to his land. He will pay your taxes and offer you his protection from both the tax collectors and roving bands of brigands. The class of independent farmers, the traditional backbone of Roman society, is disappearing, replaced by a proto-serfdom. Historians still debate whether the late Roman economy collapsed due to external pressures like invasions, or from these internal structural flaws, a classic chicken or egg dilemma of state failure. This desperation breeds new forms of resistance. In the more remote parts of the empire, like Gaul and Hispania, you hear whispers of the Bagaudae. They are bands of runaway peasants, army deserters, and escaped slaves who have taken to the hills. They are not just bandits, they are a kind of social rebellion, attacking the villas of the rich and fighting the imperial tax collectors. They are a symptom of a state that is no longer seen as a protector, but as a predator. The intricate web of trade that once stitched the Mediterranean into a single economic zone is unraveling. The great estates are becoming self-sufficient islands, producing everything they need behind their own walls. The roads are no longer safe. The seas are plagued by pirates. The poison of empty pockets is not just making you poor, it is dissolving the very bonds that hold your world together. As the empire sickens from within, its financial lifeblood turning to poison, a new and terrifying storm gathers on the distant eastern horizon. For years, you have heard whispers, strange and frightening rumors, carried by refugees and merchants. They speak of a people from the great, grassy steppes of Central Asia, a nomadic nation of horsemen so fierce and so alien that they seem less like men and more like a force of nature. They are the Huns. Their arrival in Eastern Europe in the late 4th century was the initial shockwave that pushed the Goths across the Danube, leading to the disaster at Adrianople. Now, decades later, that storm is no longer a distant rumble. It has a name and a face: Attila. You can picture the scene, described in panicked reports that reached the imperial court. A vast sea of felt and leather tents stretches across the great Hungarian plain. Thousands upon thousands of short, squat horses graze on the grasslands, and among them move the Huns, a people who, to Roman eyes, are the embodiment of the uncanny. Roman writers, like the historian Ammianus Marcellinus, describe them with a mixture of terror and fascination. They are beardless, with scarred faces and bodies that seem almost fused to their horses, as if they were a new species of centaur. They live their entire lives in the saddle, eating, sleeping, and even holding council on horseback. An eccentric curiosity you hear repeated is that they would tenderize raw meat for their meals by placing it under their saddles as they rode all day, a detail that perfectly captures their rugged, nomadic existence for a Roman audience used to bakeries and kitchens. Under the leadership of Attila, a brilliant and utterly ruthless strategist, the disparate Hunnic tribes are forged into a unified, unstoppable engine of conquest. Attila is not interested in settling land or assimilating into the Roman world like Alaric. His business is extortion on a global scale. He understands the weakness of the Roman state, and he exploits it masterfully. You see the pattern play out repeatedly. He launches devastating raids deep into the Balkans, sacking cities, slaughtering populations, and then demanding enormous sums of gold from the Eastern Roman court in Constantinople to go away. The Eastern Empire, still wealthy, chooses to pay. They essentially hire Attila to be a predator somewhere else. The annual tribute paid to the Huns becomes a crippling line item in the imperial budget, a constant drain of the very resources needed to maintain the army. This immense external pressure has a catastrophic domino effect on the Western Empire. While Attila focuses his main attention on the east, his very presence displaces everyone else. Entire nations, Vandals, Alans, Swabi, are sent fleeing westward in a great migration, a desperate scramble to escape the shadow of the Hunnic Horsemen. You see the result on New Year's Eve, in the frozen winter of 406 AD. A massive coalition of these displaced peoples crosses the Rhine River, which has frozen solid, and pours into the Roman province of Gaul. The frontier, stripped of its legions to deal with crises in Italy, collapses completely. Gaul is overrun, ravaged by years of ceaseless warfare and destruction. The invaders then push south, across the Pyrenees, and into Hispania. The Western Empire is losing control of its core provinces, not to a single, organized invasion, but to a chaotic tidal wave of desperate peoples set in motion by a terror from the steppes. In 451 AD, Attila, his demands on the east no longer being met, finally turns his full attention to the west. He gathers a huge army and marches into Gaul. Here, in one of the last great military efforts of the Western Empire, a Roman general named Itius assembles a coalition army to stop him. Itius is a fascinating figure, a man who spent his youth as a hostage among the Huns and knew them intimately. His army is a perfect reflection of the late Roman world, a fragile alliance of Roman regulars, Visigothic foederati, and other barbarian groups, all temporarily united against a common enemy. The two forces meet at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains. It is an immense, bloody, and ultimately inconclusive battle, one of the largest in antiquity. Attila is stopped, but not destroyed. He retreats, only to invade Italy the next year. Historians still debate the true significance of this battle, some calling it a victory for humanity that saved Western civilization, others viewing it as a largely Pyrrhic victory with little long-term impact. After sacking several Italian cities, Attila's campaign is halted, not by a Roman army, but by plague and famine in his own ranks, and, according to legend, by the persuasive diplomacy of Pope Leo I the next year. Attila dies, anticlimactically, of a nosebleed on his wedding night. His empire of terror dissolves as quickly as it was built, but the damage is done. The storm has passed, but it has left the house of the Western Roman Empire with its walls breached and its foundations fatally undermined. The shadow of the Hunnic Horsemen recedes, but the chaos they unleashed continues to ripple across the dying Western Empire. Your gaze now shifts south, across the sparkling, deceptively calm waters of the Mediterranean Sea, to the Roman provinces of North Africa. This region, encompassing modern-day Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, is not just another piece of territory. It is the jugular vein of the Western Empire. For centuries, it has been the imperial breadbasket, the source of the massive grain shipments that feed the city of Rome and supply the armies. Its ports are hubs of a thriving trade in olive oil, wine, and pottery. Its vast estates generate enormous tax revenues. North Africa is, quite simply, what makes the Western Roman Empire viable, and it is about to be lost. The agents of this catastrophe are the Vandals, another of the Germanic peoples sent fleeing across the Rhine by the pressure of the Huns. Led by a cunning and ambitious king named Gazeric, they have carved a destructive path through Gaul and Hispania. But Gazeric is not content with a war-torn province. He sees a richer prize across the Strait of Gibraltar. In 429 AD, using a local power struggle between Roman governors as a pretext, he leads his entire people, some 80,000 men, women, and children, across the sea into Africa. It is a stunningly bold move, an amphibious invasion that catches the Romans completely by surprise. You watch in horror as the Vandal war machine rolls eastward across the prosperous and poorly defended African provinces. They are notoriously destructive, and their brand of Arian Christianity makes them particularly hostile to the Nicene Catholic establishment, leading to the persecution of local clergy. The Roman response is weak and ineffective. The empire is too poor, too distracted by other crises, to mount a serious defense. The great intellectual of the age, St. Augustine, is the bishop of the city of Hippo Regius, and he dies while his city is under siege by the Vandals, a poignant symbol of the old world of classical learning and Roman order being extinguished. In 439 AD, Gasp achieves his ultimate goal. He captures the great city of Carthage, the provincial capital and one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the entire empire. With Carthage, he acquires a major naval base and the core of the Roman Mediterranean fleet. The Vandals, a people of the plains, have become a maritime power overnight. The loss of North Africa is a fatal blow, a wound from which the Western Empire will never recover. The economic consequences are immediate and catastrophic. The grain supply to Rome is severed. The state loses the massive tax revenues from its wealthiest provinces. The city of Rome, its population already shrinking, now faces the constant threat of famine. The government in Ravenna, already impoverished, is now truly bankrupt. It can no longer afford to pay its armies, build new ships, or maintain the infrastructure that holds the empire together. Historians still debate which single event was the most decisive nail in the coffin of the West, but a powerful case can be made for the Vandal conquest of Africa. It was a strategic and economic decapitation. Gasp is not finished. With his new fleet, he turns the Mediterranean into a Vandal lake. His ships launch pirate raids across the sea, sacking the islands of Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. And then, in 455 AD, he sets his sights on the ultimate prize. Sailing his fleet up the Tiber River, he arrives at the gates of Rome, which is now virtually defenseless. This time, there is no Alaric ordering his men to respect the churches. Pope Leo I again tries to negotiate, and while he persuades Gasp not to burn the city or massacre its people, he cannot prevent what follows. For 2 full weeks, the Vandals conduct a systematic, leisurely, and utterly thorough stripping of the city. They take everything of value that Alaric's Goths had missed, including the sacred treasures from the temple in Jerusalem that the Emperor Titus had brought to Rome centuries before. When the Vandals finally sail away, their ships heavy with plunder, they leave behind a city and an empire that is not just broken, but hollowed out, an empty shell waiting for the tide to wash it away. The treasure-laden ships of the Vandals disappear over the southern horizon, leaving behind a Rome that is a shadow of its former self, a city of ghosts and echoes. The imperial government still exists, a hollow crown residing in the fortress city of Ravenna, but its authority is a phantom. The Western Roman emperor is no longer a ruler. He is a puppet, a powerless figurehead, whose strings are pulled by the real power in the land, the Magister Militum, the master of the soldiers. And for the final 2 decades of the empire's existence, this position is held not by a Roman, but by a succession of barbarian generals. You are now witnessing the last men to wear the purple, a tragic parade of fleeting, forgotten emperors. The first and most powerful of these kingmakers is a Suebian general named Ricimer. For 17 years, from 455 to 472, he is the undisputed master of Italy. He is a man of immense talent and boundless ambition, but as a barbarian and an Arian Christian, he can never wear the imperial purple himself, so he creates and destroys emperors at will. You see a succession of them rise and fall like puppets on his stage. There is Avitus, a Gallic aristocrat, deposed by Ricimer. Then Majorian, a capable and energetic soldier who actually tries to revive the empire, launching campaigns in Gaul and planning an invasion to retake Africa from the Vandals. His attempts at reform and military resurgence are a last, flickering candle in the darkness, but his success makes him a threat to Ricimer. When Majorian's fleet is destroyed by the Vandals, Ricimer uses the failure as a pretext to have him arrested, tortured, and executed. After Majorian, the emperors become even more pathetic. Names that are barely footnotes in history. Libius, Severus, Anthemius, Olybrius, all installed and then discarded by Ricimer when they no longer served his purpose. This period is a grim illustration of the complete collapse of Roman political identity. The empire has been privatized. Power belongs to the man who controls the last vestiges of the army in Italy, which is itself a mercenary force loyal only to its paymaster, Ricimer. The Eastern Emperor in Constantinople occasionally tries to intervene, sending his own candidate, Antoninus, to rule the West, but the effort ends in a civil war in the streets of Rome itself, with Ricimer's troops sacking the city yet again to depose the man he sees as an outsider. The very concept of a Roman state, a res publica or public affair, has vanished. What is left is the personal fiefdom of a barbarian warlord. Historians still debate the motivations of men like Ricimer. Was he a cynical power broker deliberately bleeding the empire dry for his own gain? Or was he a pragmatist trying to hold together a collapsing system in the only way he knew how, through force and personal authority? The final act of this tragicomedy begins after Ricimer's death in 472. The chaos intensifies. Another barbarian general, a Burgundian named Gundobad, briefly takes over as king. But the real power is coalescing around a new figure, a Roman general from Pannonia named Orestes. Orestes had once served as a secretary to Attila the Hun, a bizarre and telling detail of this strange, interconnected world. In 475, Orestes marches his troops on Ravenna and forces the reigning emperor, Julius Nepos, to flee into exile. Now in control, Orestes does something that is both symbolic and deeply pathetic. Instead of claiming the throne for himself, he elevates his own young son to the imperial dignity. The boy's name is Romulus, a grand name, the name of the legendary founder of Rome, but he is just a child, perhaps no more than 10 years old, and he is given the diminutive nickname Augustulus, meaning little Augustus. The last emperor of the West will bear the names of both the founder of the city and the founder of the empire, but in a tragic, diminutive form. He is a child playing dress-up in the crumbling halls of power, the final, faint echo of a 1,000-year-old story. The boy, Emperor Romulus Augustulus, sits on a throne in Ravenna that might as well be made of cardboard. He is a symbol, but the reality he represents is a hollow one. The imperial regalia he wears, the purple robes and the diadem, are like a costume for a play that has long since finished its run. The real power, the swords and the soldiers, belongs to his father, Orestes, and the soldiers are getting restless. The army in Italy, the last significant military force the Western Empire possesses, is a motley collection of barbarian mercenaries, mostly Heruli, Syrians, and Rugians. They are the descendants, in spirit if not in blood, of the foederati you saw decades ago, but the pretense of them being federate allies of Rome is gone. They are the army, and Orestes is their employer, and they want to be paid, but they don't want the worthless bronze coins of the collapsed economy. They don't want promises, they want land. Specifically, they demand that a full third of the land in Italy be partitioned and given to them to settle with their families, a deal similar to what other barbarian groups had received in Gaul and Hispania. You can see the dilemma Orestes faces. To agree would be to formally surrender a huge portion of Italy to a foreign army. To refuse would be to invite a mutiny he cannot possibly hope to contain. Orestes, a Roman trying to preserve the last shred of Roman sovereignty, refuses. This is the final breaking point. The tool the empire has been using for a century to defend itself is now turning on its last master. The mercenaries renounce their allegiance to Orestes and acclaim their own leader, a towering Syrian chieftain named Odoacer, as their king. Odoacer is a product of this chaotic world, a warrior who has risen through the Roman military ranks. a man who is both barbarian chieftain and Roman general. He leads his mutinous army against Orestes, who is captured and swiftly executed. Odoacer then marches on Ravenna. There is no epic battle, no heroic last stand. The child emperor, Romulus Augustulus, is a pawn in a game he doesn't understand. On September 4th, 476, Odoacer enters the city and deposes the boy. The eagle's standard, the symbol of Roman legionary power for 1,000 years, has finally been replaced by the barbarian war axe. You see the decay of the Roman military in this final, anticlimactic moment. It's the end of a long, slow process. You can trace the lineage of this failure back through the centuries. Remember the disciplined citizen soldiers of the Republic who conquered the Mediterranean. Then the long-service professionals under the early empire, men who identified as Roman above all else. Then came the increasing reliance on provincial recruits, the barbarization of the ranks you witnessed under the foederati system, and the endless civil wars that bled the legions dry fighting each other. The very equipment changed. The iconic rectangular scutum shield was replaced by the simpler oval shield of barbarian auxiliaries. The gladius, the short stabbing sword, was replaced by the longer slashing spatha. The pilum, the sophisticated armor-piercing javelin, disappeared. An eccentric curiosity, noted by the late Roman writer Vigitius, is that Roman soldiers in the 4th and 5th centuries had largely abandoned wearing the heavy body armor of their predecessors, complaining it was too cumbersome. They were becoming lighter, more mobile, and less protected, more like the skirmishers they were so often fighting. Historians still debate the reasons for this military decay. Was it a decline in discipline, a change in tactics, a failure of logistics and supply, or simply a reflection of the broader economic and social collapse of the state that was supposed to equip them? It was likely all of these things. The Roman war machine didn't just run out of men and money, it ran out of an idea of itself. The institution that had built the empire was no longer capable of defending it, because in a very real sense, it was no longer Roman. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in Ravenna is not a dramatic, earth-shattering event. There are no trumpets of doom, no skies turning black. It is a quiet, administrative procedure. Odoacer, the new master of Italy, does not execute the boy emperor. That would be pointless and messy. Instead, he treats him with a strange, almost gentle respect. Romulus Augustulus is sent into a comfortable retirement at a luxurious villa in the Bay of Naples, given a generous pension, and allowed to live out his days in obscurity. He simply vanishes from history. The empire ends, not with a bang, but with a pension plan. Odoacer is a pragmatist. He knows the title of Western Roman Emperor is an empty one, a worthless, dangerous fiction. So he makes a decision of profound symbolic importance. He gathers the imperial regalia from Ravenna, the purple robes, the diadem, the scepter, all the trappings of Western imperial power. He bundles them up and sends them on a ship to the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno in Constantinople. The accompanying letter, written in the name of the now powerless Roman Senate, carries a clear and stunning message. It declares that the West no longer needs its own emperor. One emperor, reigning from Constantinople, is sufficient for the whole world. It asks Zeno to recognize Odoacer's authority in Italy, granting him the title of patrician, a high-ranking honorific. This act, known as the end of the Western Roman Empire, is the widely known historical fact that marks the traditional date for the fall of Rome, for 76 AD. But as you stand in the streets of Rome or on your farm in the countryside, you have to ask yourself, did you even notice? Did anything actually change on that day? For the average person, life on September 5th was exactly the same as it had been on September 3rd. The local administrator was still a Roman aristocrat. The local bishop still held services in the church. The great landowner you owed your labor to was still the man in charge. Odoacer, for his part, governs Italy with respect for Roman traditions. He keeps the Senate in place, issues coins with the Eastern Emperor's image on them, and maintains the Roman administrative system. He is, for all intents and purposes, acting as the new Roman governor of Italy, but one who answers to his own army, not to a higher imperial authority. This is why many historians now argue that the very idea of a fall in 476 is misleading. They prefer to speak of a transformation, a transition, or a long, slow decline. They point out that the empire had been losing provinces for decades. Its economy was already in ruins, and its military had long been dominated by barbarians. The deposition of the last emperor was not the cause of the collapse. It was merely a symptom, the final, quiet confirmation of a death that had already occurred. It was like tidying up a room after the guest of honor has already left. Historians still debate the significance of the date 476. Was it a truly meaningful endpoint, a clear moment of rupture, or is it an arbitrary date chosen by later historians looking for a convenient marker? The truth you feel on the ground is that the empire died by 1,000 cuts, not a single blow. It died when the Antonine Plague hollowed out the population, when the barracks emperors turned the legions on each other, when the currency was debased to worthlessness. It died when Aurelian built walls around Rome, when Constantine moved the capital to the east, when the Goths destroyed an army at Adrian. It died when the Vandals took Africa, when Attila bled the treasury dry, and when generals like Ricimer treated the throne as their personal plaything. The removal of the boy emperor was just the moment when someone finally had the decency to pull the sheet over the corpse. An eccentric and obscure piece of trivia is that the man Odoacer had to defeat to secure his power was Romulus's father, Orestes, and the man Romulus's father had deposed, the Emperor Julius Nepos, was still alive, ruling in exile in Dalmatia, and recognized by Constantinople as the legitimate emperor. So, for a few years, there was a last emperor hiding in the wings. It's a messy, complicated end to a messy, complicated story. You are standing in a field in Gaul, or perhaps on a hillside in Hispania, and the news from Ravenna, if it reaches you at all, is just a faint rumor. Another story of distant political intrigue. An emperor is gone. So what? There has been a new emperor every few years for as long as you can remember. Your life is governed by the seasons, by the success of your harvest, and by the local strongman who demands his share of it, whether he calls himself a Roman general or a Gothic king. You wake up in a world without a Western Roman emperor, and the sky has not fallen. The sun still rises. But as the years begin to slip by, you start to notice the small things, the slow, creeping changes that show you the world is fundamentally different. The great machine has stopped, and you are living among its slowly cooling parts. You need to travel to the next town to trade, a journey you once made in a single day on the magnificent Roman road. But the road is a ghost of its former self. Slabs are missing, pried up by locals to build walls. Weeds sprout from the cracks. A small stone bridge over a creek has collapsed, and no one has come to fix it. The imperial post stations, where couriers once changed horses in a flash, are abandoned, their roofs caving in. The journey now takes 3 days, and you travel with a group for safety, constantly watching the overgrown roadsides for bandits. The world has grown larger and more dangerous. Your personal map has shrunk from the size of an empire to the size of your local valley. You visit what was once a bustling provincial city. The great aqueduct that once brought a river of fresh water from the hills is now dry. A section of it collapsed a decade ago, and there is no one with the engineering skill or the state funds to repair it. The grand public baths, the very heart of Roman social life, are silent and empty, their marble pools coated in grime. The population of the city has shrunk by half, as people cluster around the few working wells or move back out to the countryside. You walk through the Forum, the civic heart of the city, where toga-clad magistrates once administered the law. A flock of goats now grazes among the fallen columns. You see a man with a cart, prying marble facing from the wall of the old courthouse. Later, you smell the acrid smoke from a makeshift kill and know what is happening. They are burning the statues of the old gods and emperors, not out of religious spite, but to create lime for mortar. This is the ultimate recycling, turning priceless art into construction material, a perfect metaphor for the age. Your sense of who you are begins to change. For centuries, your ancestors were Cives Romani, Roman citizens. It was a source of pride, a shared identity that connected you to a person in Britain or Africa. But what does that mean now? The law is no longer uniform. It is a messy patchwork of Roman legal codes and Germanic tribal customs. The Latin you speak is shifting, the crisp pronunciation of the educated elite giving way to local dialects and accents that are slowly, imperceptibly, becoming new languages. The only institution that seems to be growing in power and influence is the church. The local bishop, more than any distant king, is the new center of your community. He organizes food relief during a famine, mediates disputes, and maintains a connection to a wider, universal world, the world of Christendom. Historians still debate how quickly the lights went out, whether it was a sudden plunge into darkness or a slow regional dimming that took centuries to complete. For you, it is not darkness, but a profound quiet. The background hum of the great imperial machine, a sound so constant you never even noticed it, has finally gone silent. But as you stand there, amidst the quiet decay and the creeping silence of the West, you must remember a crucial world-altering fact. You are only witnessing half of the story. The great Roman state was a body with two lungs, and while the western lung has failed, the eastern one is breathing deeper and stronger than ever. To understand the end of Rome, you must turn your gaze eastward, across the Adriatic, to the glittering shores of the Bosphorus. You are now in Constantinople, and the year is still 476 AD, and here, in this city, nothing has fallen. In fact, for the people walking these streets, the news that some barbarian general has pensioned off a child usurper in a provincial Italian town is at best a minor piece of political news from the troubled frontier. This is the city Constantine built, the new Rome, and it is a fortress of civilization. You are surrounded by life, wealth, and power on a scale that has become unimaginable in the West. You see the massive triple-layered Theodosian walls, the most formidable defensive fortifications in the world, that have kept the city safe for a century and will for 1,000 more. You see the Golden Horn Harbor, choked with ships from Alexandria, Antioch, and the far-off Black Sea. The markets are a riot of sound and color, selling spices from India, silks from the Far East, and amber from the Baltic. The language you hear on the streets is not the fading Latin of the West, but the vibrant, flowing Greek of the Eastern Mediterranean. They do not call themselves Byzantines. That is a name that will be invented by historians centuries later. They call themselves Romaeo, Romans, and in their eyes, they are not a successor state. They are the Roman Empire, direct, unbroken, and eternal. Historians still debate precisely when to stop calling it the Roman Empire and start calling it the Byzantine Empire, a testament to the seamless continuity of its existence. This Eastern Empire will not only survive, it will thrive. It will face its own devastating plagues, its own brutal civil wars, and its own existential threats from Persians, Arabs, and Slavs. But it will endure. In the next century, you will see the Emperor Justinian the Great, a man of boundless energy and ambition, who dreams of restoring the whole empire. He will codify 1,000 years of Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis, a legal masterpiece that will become the foundation for most modern European legal systems. He will send his great general, Belisarius, to reconquer North Africa from the Vandals and Italy from the Goths, briefly reuniting large parts of the old empire under one rule. In the heart of his capital, he will build the Hagia Sophia, a church so vast and beautiful, with a dome that seems to float on a cushion of pure light, that upon entering it for the first time, he will whisper, Solomon, I have surpassed you. This ghost empire, as some might call it, is a hub of immense wealth and sophisticated statecraft. It guards the knowledge of the ancient world in its great libraries, preserving the works of Greek philosophers and Roman historians that were being lost in the West, and it engages in acts of economic espionage that would impress a modern spy agency. For centuries, the empire's great rival, the Sassanid Persian Empire, controlled the lucrative silk trade from China. To break this monopoly, Justinian, according to the historian Procopius, dispatched monks on a secret mission to the Far East. The monks returned years later, carrying hollow bamboo canes. Inside, they had smuggled the one thing the Persians could not control: silkworm eggs. Mulberry trees were planted, a domestic silk industry was born, and the empire secured its own source of the most prized luxury commodity in the world. For another 1,000 years after the last Western emperor was pensioned off, this other Rome, this Greek-speaking, Christian, profoundly Roman state, would carry the eagle standard forward, a brilliant, complicated, and defiant ghost on the edge of Europe. And so, the long journey ends. You stand now, not in a dusty forum in Rome or on the glittering shores of the Bosphorus, but here, in your own quiet room, with the echoes of 2,000 years of history settling around you like dust motes in a beam of light. The story is told. The great marble statue has crumbled, and you might be asking yourself a final, simple question. Why? Why does this one particular fall, this slow, agonizing, complicated death of an ancient superpower, continue to haunt us so deeply? Why have you listened for so long to a story whose ending you already knew? You have listened because the story of Rome is a mirror. In its triumphs and its fatal flaws, in its incredible resilience and its ultimate fragility, we see a reflection of ourselves. You live in a world of breathtaking complexity, a globalized system of trade, communication, and finance that would have stunned even the most ambitious Roman.